Okay, so if you could first just state your name and describe the religious organization that you represent.
I am Brother Anandamoy, and I belong to a Self-Realization Fellowship, to the monastic order, which is a worldwide, actually, organization, religious organization. It was founded by Paramahansa Yogananda, who came in 1920 to America to attend the um, Congress of Religious Liberals. He was the delegate from India. And then he stayed in his country and he founded the Self-Realization Fellowship in Los Angeles with headquarters in Los Angeles.
Could you go through a little bit more of the Self-Realization Fellowship as it compares to other religions such as Protestantism or other Eastern religions?
Well, actually, of course, he came to teach the techniques of yoga, of meditation. And he taught that this is really the esoteric aspect underlying all the great religions. Religions are different in the exoteric aspect. And there, naturally, we have different dogmas, different approaches, different methods, different ceremonies and rituals and that sort of thing. And he sent the various religions in order to teach or to lead people according to their understanding and their needs. And so obviously there are differences. But underneath, there's the esoteric aspect, and unfortunately most people don't even know about that. And that is the science of yoga. Now I'm talking about Raja Yoga, the royal path, the royal aspect, which combines the various branches of yoga, like Hatha Yoga. Well, I didn't want to even mention that. Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and so on. And Raja Yoga is taking the essence of all of them, plus the scientific techniques of meditation.
How long have you personally been on the spiritual path, and could you kind of describe how you came down this path?
Well, I prayed for a guru.
Could you kind of repeat that in a way that so we won't have the question there? I started thinking about religion, or
All right. I started reading in my early teens about Buddha, about Swami Vivekananda, Ramakrishna, and some other Christian saints and so on, and I thought, this is really what I want. I want illumination. I want to have the experience of God. It's not enough to just listen to sermons in a church and so on, but I really want to experience. And so I started to pray for a guru, and nothing happened until I came to America. I came to study with Frank Lloyd Wright, architect. But the first week when I was in this country, I got the autobiography of a yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, and when I read that, I knew this is the one that can give me what I want. And so I signed up for the lessons. That was in 1948. And then a little later, I went into the ashram. Paramahansa Yogananda accepted me as a monastic disciple. And I've been there ever since.
why should people seek God in the first place?
Well, people have to seek God because that's the goal. I mean, everybody is seeking happiness, right? And everybody is seeking really eternal happiness. Most people don't even know that. But it is ultimate fulfillment. This is in one word summing up everything that people really want. And that includes absolute love, peace, wisdom, and so on, and joy. And Paramahansa Yogananda said that God consciousness is bliss consciousness. That's what really everybody is seeking. But most people don't know. That is the sad part in society today, that people really don't know what the purpose of life is. They have been making research. There's a professor of psychology of Susan Whitbourne at the University of Massachusetts, who has made extensive research about what people want, what people's troubles are, and so on. And she found that people really are desperate, trying to find fulfillment, and they are seeking it in where they cannot find it. They seek it in the things of the world, either in the senses, either in money and power and all that sort of thing. And they never find it. They are never satisfied. No matter how much money a person has, there's still something lacking. Probably the greatest disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda was a self-made business tycoon. And he told me he grew up as a poor farm boy. And being poor, he thought money, that's it. And so he created a business empire for himself. And he told me, he said, after I had my first million, I was a deeply frustrated man because I realized that money cannot buy happiness. And so then he started to search, and he met Paramahansa Yogananda and started meditating. And then later on he said, now I have learned to live by inward joy. And it doesn't matter anymore whether I have anything outside or not. This is really what I wanted. And he said, this is what everybody wants.
You yourself are a monk. For the average person who doesn't have the time or the means to seek God in the fashion that you do you think that seeking God is compatible with modern life?
Oh, seeking God is absolutely compatible with modern life. Because when you look at the different saints of the various religions throughout the centuries, you find them in any category of outer occupation, whether a householder or monastics or whatever. It is not the outer, it's the inner. And that is why one of the gurus behind Paramahansa Yogananda, his guru was Sri Yukteswar, who first was a householder. After the death of his wife, he became a monk. And his guru was Larimasha, who was a householder. He had 4 children. And they came really to show, through their example, that anyone with these teachings can find God.
So the Christian scriptures, seek and ye shall find. You would answer that to say that, how would you describe or explain that scripture, interpret that scripture?
Well, the highest commandment in the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, is love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. And that is in one sentence the whole essence of Raja Yoga, because it means to use all our faculties and turn them inward in the search for the spiritual experience inside of the soul. And then finding him inside, there comes the last stage of expansion and becoming one with the infinite. And in the Old Testament also, be still and know that I am God. Now that's exactly the definition that Patanjali gave in the Yoga Sutras. He said yoga, meaning union with God, comes through the stilling of the waves of consciousness. So underlying the various religions, they have it. They all say really the same thing. And yet they're concentrating on the superficial differences, and they see divisions. No need for division. We have in our membership. We just had a convocation in Los Angeles 3 weeks ago. Over 6,000 people came from 52 countries, 49 states of the United States. And they came from all kinds of different religious backgrounds. We have Jews, we have Christians, we have Hindus, we have Muslims, we have Buddhists, we have Sikhs, we have Jains, and some others. And they all say, through these teachings, we have gained a deeper appreciation and understanding of our own religion. I went once in Los Angeles. I was invited to give a lecture on yoga in a Jewish community. So I went there, and obviously there I didn't quote the Christian Bible, I quoted the Jewish prophets. And afterwards, a woman came to me and she said, what you are teaching is actually our Jewish religion, isn't it? I said, yes, but not only. It is the essence of Judaism. It is also the essence of Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism and whatnot. So there's a unity. And that's the sad part, that people don't see that.
For many people, God is not really real. Is not real. God is not real for many people. Is God real to you? Do you experience God?
There are degrees, of perception of God. The first experience I had was when I saw Paramahansa Yogananda the first time. He gave Sunday service in our temple in Los Angeles, and afterwards most people went to greet him, and I did. And then when I stood before him, he took my hand, and the moment he touched me, I was drunk with the joy of God, and I knew it was so much that I could hardly contain it. I'd never experienced anything like that. I didn't even dream that such joy is possible. And I knew he had given me a touch of the bliss consciousness of God. But of course it's not quite that easy, I mean, you have to gradually become receptive through efforts in right living in harmony with divine law. You cannot go against the laws of God and think that you can at the same time have a spiritual experience. Those things don't work together. Going against God's laws creates a negative vibration in your consciousness. And then you cannot be in attunement or receptive to the true spiritual experience. So that's why every great religion has a foundation of, like the Ten Commandments, or in yoga, yama niyama, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't lie, you should not be greedy, and you should love God, and things like that. But most people think that's it to religion. But that's only a foundation. And then on that foundation you build the structure through the deeper aspects of interiorization, meditation, and then having the inner experience of God.
Has God actually appeared to you or spoken to you?
Not that way, unless you think in terms of what is the voice of God. It is Om. It is the Holy Ghost, cosmic vibration. That, yes. We are not looking for voices. You have to understand what Paramahansa Yogananda always cautioned us, not to look for phenomenal experiences, psychedelic experiences, but the essence of God's aspects, such as peace, not just ordinary peace, absence of restlessness, but the deep peace, which Jesus mentioned in saying, that peace which passes all understanding. Or other aspects are love, joy, wisdom, that sort of thing. You know, you're talking about hearing the voice. This is very superficial compared to the other, which are experienced deep in the superconsciousness of the soul.
When you experience God, what feelings do you have of God? What is the feeling when God is near?
That cannot be described with human language, because human language is based on sense perception, and a true superconscious experience is beyond duality or beyond what the senses or the mind or the emotions can experience. I can give you an illustration of one aspect, wisdom, for instance. According to the Hindu scriptures, there is manas, which is Sanskrit for the sensory mind, and then there's a higher mind of discrimination, which is called buddhi, and beyond that, now these are instruments through which the soul works, but beyond that is the soul or God itself. And wisdom is an aspect of God. Now, I have to say it in symbols, because it cannot be expressed in words. Because if it could be expressed in words, it wouldn't be the real thing. It would be too limited. But let's say you have the total knowledge of what man ever knew in the past, knows now, and the total knowledge of man that man will know in the future. You take all that together and you make a little mothball out of it. And that is at your feet, and here you are in the infinite wisdom. Now you wouldn't even dream of picking up that little mothball and taking it apart and to know what an Einstein knew or whatever great mind intellectual knew. It's trash. It's total trash compared to that infinite wisdom, which is the wisdom aspect of God.
Some people have described their perception of God as ever conscious, ever new bliss, tremendous peace. What has been your experience?
Right?
What has been your experience? What do you feel when you meditate deeply and you feel God?
Well, it's not always the same in every meditation, you know, but I have experienced just about the basic aspects. As I said, wisdom, I have experienced the peace aspect, I have experienced the love aspect, the joy aspect. So, you know, and I think that Master gave me certain experiences so that I can talk he told me that I would have to teach, so that I would really speak from inner conviction.
Do you think that many people in the world today, they see the saints of the past as the only kind of saints that are really present now? Do you consider yourself a saint? And do you know people today who are one with God?
Oh, well, first of all, my experience the greatest experience was Paramahansa Yogananda himself. I have met, and then some of his great disciples, and I'm not counting myself among them, you know, who really, truly had the divine consciousness. I have met saints of other religions. I have met Anandamoyi Ma in India. I have met Teresa Neumann, in the stigmatist, Catholic stigmatist in Germany. I have seen Padre Pio, stigmatist priest in Italy. But Paramahansa was, in my experience, the greatest of them.
What steps should the average person take to come to know the living God?
There are different paths, there are different approaches, and each person has to choose the path which he feels is right for him. That is a very deeply personal matter. We are not trying to convert people or, proselytize and say you have to follow this path or this is the only one or things like that. We never say that. We recognize the fact that there are differences in approaches and not everybody can follow exactly the same path. I think this is a principle that God has in His creation. There are not only one kind of birds or one kind of roses or one kind of, it's the variety. This is the principle of creation. And so there are different, so-called different religions or different aspects of, or, aspects of religions. And so I think everybody has to first look around and investigate and see who could be a true teacher for him. And to go about this in, I would say, or the master Paramahansa used to say, ask who is his teacher. Was he somebody? Was he a saint? Did he have realization? And then can also see, has that teacher produced disciples of realization? As Jesus said, by their fruits you shall recognize them.
Let me just check and see if they have it.
What is your daily spiritual routine?
It depends. My daily routine is, it depends on how much work I have and things like that. Usually early in the morning I start meditating by myself in my room. And then in a monastery, in the ashram, we have then group exercises. We do a certain series of exercises which was taught to us by Paramahansa. And then we have group meditations. Then we have breakfast. Then we go to work. At noon, again, we have individual meditations for about half an hour. Then lunch, and then work. And then in the evening, again, group exercises, group meditations. After that is those that want to, supper, just very light supper. And afterwards, some of them are going back again to work, and then meditation, and then go to sleep, or no work, or having a class in the evening, or things like that. And then again, meditation. So the thing is, our life is, people say, well, you are a monk, therefore you have it easier. But we are working maybe just as many hours or more than a person that is out in the world, who has family. The one thing we don't have is television. Because that is a total waste of time. And you probably know from experience that if you get into the habit of television, then you want to see more and more and more, and then precious time is being wasted, which could be used for in the spiritual search. And why do people spend so much time on television? It is to really to fill the inner emptiness they have, which they could use in a more productive way, so meditation.
It seems as if you're spending much more time than the average person who seeks God. Do you think that that's a key, that you work hard at seeking God, or is it all God and what do you think is the key to finding God?
The key to finding God is that you, first of all, that you know what the goal of life is, what the purpose of life is. Most people don't know. That's the sad part. And if a person really is once convinced that that is the purpose, the main purpose of life, not only that, but that is the thing which will give you that fulfillment which you have been seeking, then automatically you have priority, isn't it? Then that comes first. That's more important than anything else. And so, I mean, when people say, well, I don't have much time or I don't have time, I say, look, if you have a toothache, you'll find time to go to the dentist, right? And they say, yes. And then I say, well, why? Because you think that's important, isn't it? So what you have to do is you have to cultivate the conviction that this is important. And this is really very interesting. Paramahansa started his mission in the West with this very point. What God is, and this is what you need and want, and you will never have any rest until you have it. That's how he started his mission. That's how he ended his mission. The evening before his Mahasamadhi, he gave a talk at a banquet which was dedicated to the Indian ambassador. But he said, I am not here in an advisory capacity. So he was not teaching there. But the evening before, when he talked to some of us monks, he gave again the main points of what we have to remember. And the main point that he stressed was the desire for God. He said, you have to cultivate the desire for God. Nobody can give it to you. You have to cultivate it yourself. And so, you know, the power of Maya is very, very strong, always trying to divert the attention of people, saying, you get this, or you do this, and you do that, and you will be happy, away from God. And that's why he wrote in his autobiography of a yogi that to surmount Maya, meaning the duality, was the task set before mankind by the millennial prophets. I mean, essentially, the prophets, or the great teachers, great saints of the various religions, they have all taught the same thing in different words. Some of them more clearly, some of them more in symbology or allegory. Like Jesus, when he said that man who's found that precious pearl, he sold everything else in order to buy that pearl. Meaning, that pearl represents God, God consciousness. Get that. Everything else is not that important.
Switch batteries, or?
I have something, I was getting some flash. So I just want to get a battery. Okay, we're still rolling.
Okay, 5 more minutes and we'll stop. How did you feel those first few days after Paramahansa Yogananda passed?
Repeat the question.
When Paramahansa Yogananda passed, there was such an incredible presence, his presence. It was so tangible that I didn't feel he had gone. And he did that on purpose in order to that we wouldn't feel that we are dependent on his physical presence, because he always said that anyway when he was with us. He said, don't become too attached to this body. Make the inner attunement, and then you will know that I'm always with you. And so we didn't have to learn that after his passing. We had already established that.
You should tape out. Some of the people, some of the religious leaders we've talked to, the men of God, and that we've talked to in the last few days, and have said that silence seems a repeated word, that in silence they find God. Have you found that to be true?
Well, that's exactly. Be still and know that I am God. It is, God is found in the silence, as far as whenever there is motion, you are in outer consciousness. That's why Paramahansa said, when motion ceases, that's where God begins. Which, silence, yes, but it is not only silence, it is really silence of all the instruments. It is silence of thought, it is silence of the emotions, it is stillness of the energy, and certainly stillness of shutting off of the senses. All that. But when I say now silence of the mind, I do not mean going into a blank state of mind or in a passive state of mind. There are some systems who are teaching that meditation is going into a blank state of mind. That is not true. That's totally contrary to the true teaching of meditation, because in the Bible, for instance, it says, love God with all your heart, all your mind, isn't it? All your soul, all your strength. That means all your mind, that is, the mind is focused totally. You're not going into a blank state. But the mind is not restless and not thinking processes. Thinking means, as long as a person is thinking, he is really in ego consciousness. And so a person may, this is a great temptation. Some people think that beautiful devotional thoughts and so on, spiritual thoughts, that this will lead them into spiritual experience. It's not true, because as long as the mind is in motion, it's still ego consciousness. So you have to go through deep concentration, and then the mind changes. And from the ordinary mind, it transcends into superconscious mind. And there is stillness, there is awareness, there is being. There's no more thinking there.
My last question is, if you had anything to say to people who are truly seeking God, do you have anything you'd wish to tell them?
Well, first, tell people who want to find God, what do I say? First of all, try to avoid activities which are producing restlessness, excitement. And there again it comes, much of the media now, movies, television, much of the music that people are listening to, it's all creating excitement, restlessness. And that can be such a deep habit that it's very difficult. And when they try to meditate and try to concentrate on God, all the vehicles, all the instruments are vibrating like crazy. So that is something that this present societies, they are doing the wrong way. They are going the wrong way because they are seeking in excitement happiness, fulfillment. And it isn't in that, it is in the stillness. So that's I think automatically when a person is sincerely seeking God and starts to meditate, he realizes that all those exciting things are not necessary anymore. They drop off. I remember one of the movie actors told me that he used to go to parties, and he said I was always the first one to arrive and I was the last to leave. And then he said after I came on the path and started to meditate, I saw that parties are a total waste of time and I'm not going anymore. And that wasn't Dennis Beaver either. I think he never went to parties. And then, of course, seeking a true teaching and start to make the spiritual effort.
Let's see if Parmananda's out the door. Let's see who it's.
Get some hand shots for you.
Yeah, if you could follow my hand for a second, just leave your hands right in the lap. She's going to take some pictures of them. Let her, tell me when you're focused, Denise. Could you follow me now? Just watch my hands. Do what I'm doing right here with my hands. Just watch my hands. Just follow me. We're sort of playing patty cake.
That?
Kind of. We're just...
So have him slide this paper on the door. No, have him slide something on the door. That's our key and it's silent. Right.
Can we go on, or... Yes.
Yeah.
But doesn't he have to leave before?
There's nothing arranged yet. If your brother finishes before, just tell me go to his room. So we can say, the other
Okay.
thing's been scheduled, we can go on here. Brother Parmananda will slide something under the door when it's time for brother to quit.
Okay.
And we won't bang on the door and interrupt.
You mean you have more questions?
Oh, I have more, but I thought I was wrapping it up because I thought we were...
He's only done it for a little more than a half hour, so.
Yeah, we usually last an hour.
Oh my. Well, I don't, you know. I'm satisfied with less.
Let me ask you just a few more questions then. Is there evil in the world? What is evil?
Well, there's big controversy about the question of is there evil in the world, and obviously, of course there is evil. You have to have, that's part of creation. Creation is built on the principle of duality. You cannot have a picture that is only white, isn't it? You have to have contrast. You have to have darkness also. And so you look at a movie, if you have only one black and white movie, if you have only one, there's no picture. So the whole creation is built on the principle of duality, and so you have pleasure and pain, you have good and evil, you have life and death. It's there. God created it. He had to create it in order to have a manifestation. It says it in the Bible. It's God speaking through the prophet Isaiah. I form the light and darkness. I create good and evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. Actually, there's nothing that man can create. Everything has already been created. That's why in the autobiography of a yogi, the master is, I think, he is quoting his guru, Sri Yukteswar. He said, thoughts are not individually but universally rooted. In other words, man cannot create a new thought. It's already created by God. In order to have a complex creation, you have all those thought vibrations from the lowest to the highest. It's all there. Now, if a person thinks an evil thought, he is not responsible for that. God created it. But if he dwells on that, then he is responsible. You know, sometimes a person may just pick up a thought and it may be an evil thought. But if a person dwells on that, then he is responsible.
Why do bad things happen to good people?
Oh, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, that's the two major doctrines. One is law of karma, cause and effect. The other one is the law of reincarnation. And as the Bible says, as you sow, so shall you reap. If a person creates wrong actions or wrong thoughts, thinks wrong thoughts, then that whatever a person gives out comes back to him. So the unfortunate thing is that people do not see the connection. When something bad happens to them, they do not see the cause, but they have laid up the cause themselves. So we are very responsible for our own welfare or hardships.
What do you see as the most difficult obstacle that you had to face in finding God?
Well, the greatest obstacle, of course, is delusion. The whole package of Maya, which tries to divert your attention from God.
Could you go through that a little bit? Some people, other audiences may not be aware of what Maya is. Could you describe that? What do you mean when you say Maya?
Maya is the seeming reality of this world. It's very difficult to really describe it, because the only real comparison that I can give, what the master used to give, was the movie or the dream. When you see a movie, it seems all very real on the screen, isn't it? And then when you go to the screen and you touch it and you see there are no mountains, no people, and no animals or whatever you see, it's nothing there, it's just a big illusion. And the dream is exactly the same thing. You, as long as you're dreaming, that dream, whatever you see, this is very real. But when you wake up, you know that these things didn't actually happen. It was a projection of your thoughts and energy. And so likewise, what we see through our senses, this whole world, the whole perception of this world, is a big delusion, because it's not the way it appears to the senses. I mean, science has already proven that. This, when you look at the human body or any substance, and to our senses it seems solid substance. But science has proven that this is mostly empty space. It's just like when you look at night in the sky and you see the stars, and you see if you realize the immensity of empty space between the stars, that's about how matter is composed of emptiness. And then comes, like Jesus said, if the night be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. This is yoga. Meaning the single eye that he was referring to is the spiritual eye here. And if a person lives this consciousness in meditation, there comes a new perception. There is no more the sensory perception of the body being flesh and bones and all that stuff, but it's nothing but light. And so what Jesus meant with that saying is actual experience as a result of yoga, of meditation. And so then you realize that the senses are really deceiving you. And so it is like being hypnotized by the suggestion of Maya, which suggests all this as being real. And actually it's only different vibrations manifesting to our senses as different material objects, like cloth or flesh or marble or wood. It's nothing but light vibrations. If you go still deeper, it is all pure consciousness.
Do you catch yourself, I want to use the word sinning, but do you find that you
Oh,
still have
yes.
sins?
Oh, yes.
What are some of the sins that you have? What are some of the sins that you, on the daily basis, that you have to overcome, even at this stage, as a man who's been a monk for what, 50 years? I don't know how long it's been, but
44.
I
44
was a
years.
close guesser.
44 years of being a monk. Well, you know, I have always been wondering, when I read in the beginning, before I became a monk, when I read in the writings of, let's say, St. Teresa of Avila, who talked about, and other saints who said how great sinners they were, and I thought, wait a minute, these are saints, and they're talking about themselves as being sinners. There's something wrong there. And then later on, through my own experience, I realized that you become very, very sensitive to things which before you wouldn't even notice. That, let's say, even a wrong thought. You see somebody and you does something wrong, and you register that, and there may be a negative thought, or anything like that. It becomes very subtle, extremely subtle. And I remember one of the great disciples of Paramahansa Yogananda, Gyanamata, who the master said when she left the body, when she died after her death, she was completely liberated. She was not only a great saint, but she was completely liberated of all physical karma, and the astral and the causal. She is one with the infinite. That's the final. And even she said that sometimes it was just when she was aware of the slightest little transgression, which to an ordinary person is no transgression at all, not to speak of sin. But to her, she was aware of the slightest little tremor of not being totally right. So it's a progressive thing of and sometimes people think, well, I'm going backward spiritually. But that is not, as long as a person is trying and making the effort as best as he can, he is bound to go forward. There's no way of going backward. But it seems sometimes like that because there is a more subtle awareness of what is not quite right.
What is your best remembrance of Paramahansa Yogananda?
I've been asked many times what my greatest experience was, and I cannot really pin it down to one particular thing. What I admired in him was his incredible understanding of people and myself, because he didn't see just the person now. He saw much deeper. He saw the past incarnations. He saw the future. It was all in eternal now. And he saw the soul. And that is why he treated people with a very, you cannot even describe that, because you really have to see that. The way he treated people with a certain natural dignity and respect. Even when he had to scold us or correct us, we still were aware, at least I was aware, that he saw not just that mistake that he was correcting, but he saw the soul. He saw the divine inside. And then, naturally, his unconditional love and acceptance. That's, this is you don't find that in the world to that degree of perfection of unconditional love.
You mentioned that Paramahansa Yogananda could see in the future. Some people would interpret that as ungodly type of power. Have you yourself ever been able to see down the road into someone else's future or your own future? And is that of God or is that of the devil?
Well, I just told that story yesterday to a group of devotees. When I came first into the ashram, there were a couple young monks who once in a while talked about past incarnations, about trying to figure out what or who they could have been, or who Paramahansa might have been in the past, and so on. And I was interested, and I had a desire to know about my past incarnations, some of them at least. And then it happened that I discovered a technique which enabled me to look back into the past, my past incarnations, and also other people's. And I was very excited. I thought, I really have something now. It was just like a little boy who had discovered a cookie jar full of cookies, you know. And then I got a call, Master wants to see you. And so I ran to him. And before I could say anything to give him the good news about my discovery, he said, I don't want you to look back into past incarnation. You stop it. There goes my cookie jar, you know. And then he explained, he said, if you do that, if you look back, you become identified again with the past masquerades of your soul. And at that time, I was too new on the path. I didn't quite understand what he meant. But later on, I understood, and I said, I realized how fortunate I was to have a guru who does not permit a disciple to indulge in any phenomenal powers or psychic powers or anything like that, because you can really get lost in that. And what he meant was, you are identified now with your body, with your personalities, and your role that you have to play, and so on. To go beyond that and to realize that you are the soul, that's hard enough. Now, if you add to that all the past masquerades, you know, all the past roles, because, you know, it can be quite interesting, because I saw myself, the soul is not always born in a male body or always in a female body. That changes. And I saw some of that stuff, you know, when I was in a woman's body and so on. And that can really make it complicated, you know. You get so involved in that mentally, or even emotionally. That's even worse. And so his training was always, when he saw a disciple going off on any tangent, he said, no, God is the project, nothing else. And when somebody asked him why Rajarsi Janakananda, is one of the great disciples, went so fast, reaching the highest state consciousness, he said, because two things. He knows how to listen, meaning he follows the Guru, and he did not make use of his powers. That's a temptation. Now, he being the Guru, who is one with God, he didn't have to worry about, you know, falling into a temptation like that. Besides being the Guru, he had to know the past of a disciple in order to be able to help him. He has to know what is coming in that disciple's karma and help him spiritually that way.
Can an advanced guru take on the sins of a disciple?
It is just like a rich person who can pay the debts of somebody, let's say a relative or whatever. So likewise, the true master can take on karma for a disciple, to help the disciple. And he doesn't need to work it out on his own body. He can do it with spiritual power. Although sometimes a master does take karma works it out on his body.
When you look at the Christian term that Christ died for the sins of the world, how do you interpret that?
Many of the statements in the Bible are not quite clear. They have to be interpreted properly in order to really understand. I don't believe that Christ taught that he would take the sins of the world. He said the sins of many. There is no master who takes the sins of the whole world. A great avatar can take a certain portion of world karma, but not all the sins of all, all forever. But you see, the great difficulties with the Bible is this brings up a whole new subject now, but there is a difference between Jesus, the person, and the Christ consciousness. So it is not Jesus or any other master who is taking the sins of the world. It is the Christ consciousness which takes the sins of the world. In other words, if a person goes into that state of consciousness, sin doesn't function, does not register. There is no karma that can register in that unity of God's consciousness. So going into that state of consciousness, at that moment, karma, sin, death, sorrow, suffering is all eliminated, because these are all properties or aspects of mortal consciousness. And then there is the other thing, for instance, when Jesus said, "None cometh unto the Father but by me," and this has really caused a lot of trouble, because Christians have interpreted that you can have salvation only through Jesus. And obviously that isn't true, because there have been Buddhists, there have been Muslim saints, there have been Hindu saints and so on, who had God consciousness, and they never knew about Jesus. So what they do not know is that Jesus again meant not through the person, Jesus, but the Christ consciousness. And with that statement and similar statements, he simply followed an Eastern tradition. He was not the only one that talked like that. That is an Eastern tradition, where a great master, when he says "I," does not mean the person, but his consciousness. Krishna did that in the Bhagavad Gita. Kapila did it. Janaka and others. They did that. But in the West, people who do not know that, do not understand that, they take that, the words of Jesus, and take it literally. And this really caused a lot of confusion and separation. They think we have to convert everybody, otherwise they all go to hell, right? And it's just not so. Jesus never meant to make his teaching an exclusive sect, and this is really what it is. As long as people think only through Jesus can they have salvation, then that's an exclusive sect, and all the others are excluded, right? That's a big tragedy, because it is so difficult, because the words of a great master often are not understood properly. That's why you really have to have somebody who has the same consciousness and can explain what it is all about.
Do you feel that the ego being attached to the I persona is, how would you describe that as an obstacle? Can a God-realized person have a consciousness and a sense of being I, or does that have to be melded into God?
The I, what we usually think, what the average person thinks I is the ego, because it is that self which is identified with the body and the personality and all that. And there is a constant struggle, especially for a person that is striving to awaken soul consciousness. There's a constant battle going on between the ego and the soul, even though the soul battle, that's a figure of speech, because the soul doesn't act. But that in Gyanamata, a great disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, said that the ego has the soul by its throat. And so the ego has to gradually be overcome to realize the soul. Now, a master needs a little bit of the ego just to hang on to be in a body. Otherwise, the body would just dissolve. And but it is no more the binding ego. It is just like something that you need in order to be able to function as on this human plane, on this earth plane.
I don't think I have any more questions. I think that's all we have.
Our next chant will be O Thou Blue Sky. It's It's on page 13 in your chant book. O thou blue sky, under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord. Open thy cover, let me discover my beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts. My beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts.
Hast thou
thou and I never apart. Wave of the sea,